The so-called champions of free speech and online safety, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, have once again stepped into the spotlight with another statement, one that's heavy on irony. This time, their focus is on the dangers of online bullying. 4. A couple that frequently speaks about kindness and compassion. Their own history of public criticism and not-so-subtle jabs at their own family seems conveniently overlooked. Meghan, always eager to present herself as an activist, proudly takes up the cause while sidestepping her own role in fueling division. Meanwhile, Harry continues to stand by her side, delivering yet another round of moral lectures. But beneath their carefully crafted words and grand declarations, what's really going on? Let's take a closer look at their latest attempt to shape the conversation. The Sussexes seem determined to stay in the spotlight, even as public patience wears thin. Their latest statement, unsurprisingly released on their self-branded platform, Sussex.com, painted them as selfless advocates for the greater good. This time, they voiced concern over the rise of online bullying following policy changes by a major tech company. At first glance, their message appears noble, but a closer look reveals some familiar patterns. The timing, for one, is hard to ignore. This grand declaration conveniently arrives just as Prince William takes on a more prominent role in the monarchy. Coincidence? Highly unlikely. Meghan and Harry have a well-documented habit of making headlines just as major royal events unfold, ensuring the focus remains on them. Then there's the content of their message. While they claim to stand for free speech, their actions often tell a different story. Time and again, they've been quick to silence critics and control their own narrative. Their relentless need to remain relevant seems to take priority, even if it means overshadowing Harry's own family. Meghan Markle, much like Harry, has made it a mission to control the narrative surrounding their lives, even going so far as to demand corrections and apologies from the media for anything short of glowing praise. Their version of free speech, it seems, only applies when it aligns with the image they carefully curate. Their latest call for tech giants to reinstate policies protecting all users feels more like performative activism than genuine concern. It's easy to demand change when you're speaking from the comfort of a multi-million-dollar mansion, far removed from the struggles of everyday people. Their appeals for integrity and public safety in online spaces sound hollow when placed next to their own history of airing family grievances on a global stage. After all, isn't publicly criticizing their own relatives a form of bullying in itself? The irony doesn't stop there. Their statement praises leaders who refuse to bow to intimidation, yet they've spent years portraying themselves as victims of the very institutions that once supported them. Harry's tell-all memoir is just one example of how their actions often contradict their words. Meghan's not-so-subtle jabs in interviews have done little to promote kindness or understanding. Instead, they've deepened divisions and fueled resentment, all while she and Harry present themselves as the ultimate voices of compassion. Then there's the carefully crafted narrative they've built around themselves. By constantly positioning themselves as champions of every cause they support, they risk undermining their own credibility. Meghan, who often leans into the role of the misunderstood outsider, has turned victimhood into a personal brand. It's difficult to take their concerns about online bullying seriously when they've shown no hesitation in throwing others under the bus to further their own agenda. This latest statement also raises an important question. What's their endgame? Are Harry and Meghan genuinely invested in these causes? Or is this just another calculated move to stay in the headlines? Their track record suggests the latter, as every issue they champion always seems to coincide with a carefully timed media push. With their constant need for media attention, one has to wonder, how much longer will the public put up with their antics? The world has started to see through the carefully crafted image of altruism and compassion they work so hard to maintain. Their words may sound noble, but their actions tell a different story, and the message isn't flattering. Meanwhile, the 5e royal family continues to fulfill their duties with quiet dignity, making the contrast even more obvious. While Harry and Meghan seek validation and the spotlight, their behavior only underscores the differences between them and the institution they so often criticize. Perhaps the most frustrating part of this saga is the wasted opportunity. Harry and Meghan had the chance to build a meaningful role for themselves outside the monarchy, yet they've chosen to dwell in a cycle of constant grievances. Their obsession with controlling the narrative and playing the victim has overshadowed any real contributions they could have made. Their latest statement is just another chapter in the ongoing story of their quest for relevance. A tale filled with contradictions, hypocrisy, and performative activism. They remain at the center of the storm they've created, insisting they are fighting the good fight. But the reality is far less noble and far more revealing. As they continue their relentless push for attention, one thing becomes increasingly clear: their desperate attempts to prove their importance in a world that is quickly moving on. Meghan, despite all her talk of social justice, once again finds herself wrapped in a narrative that feels more self-serving than impactful. Is the world truly a better place for those affected by online bullying? Or is this just another calculated attempt to stay relevant in a media landscape that's clearly losing interest? Their latest statements, heavy with self-importance, try to paint them as champions of the voiceless. Yet, the contradiction is impossible to ignore. They claim to support free speech, yet they've shown little tolerance for opposing views, especially when those views are critical of them. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Meghan, who has repeatedly demanded apologies for even the slightest criticism, now presents herself as a defender of open discourse. Meanwhile, Harry continues to push the narrative that he's been silenced, all while eagerly stepping into the spotlight whenever given the chance. Are these truly the champions of free speech? Or are they just two people desperately clinging to relevance? And then, of course, there's the elephant in the room. As Harry and Meghan create headlines in a bid to hold on to their fading relevance, Prince William has quietly and steadily shown why he is the true future of the monarchy. While his brother and sister-in-law seem driven by self-interest and a need for public admiration, William continues to demonstrate maturity, dignity, and a deep sense of responsibility, highlighting the stark contrast between them. While Harry and Meghan have turned personal grievances into a public spectacle, William has remained focused on what truly matters: his duty to the crown and service to his country. Instead of dwelling on perceived slights or seeking validation, he has embraced his role, preparing for the future, especially as his father faces health challenges. William's ability to stay composed amid ongoing family drama speaks volumes. He doesn't need to make grand statements every time he feels wronged. Instead, he lets his actions do the talking, proving that true leadership isn't about seeking attention, but about serving with quiet strength. William lets his actions speak for themselves, while Harry and Meghan's statements often feel self-serving, crafted to paint themselves as victims of the very institution they once benefited from. In contrast, William has consistently demonstrated his commitment to the royal family's best interests. His recent steps to consolidate his role within the monarchy are not just a natural progression as he prepares for kingship, but a testament to his steady leadership and quiet determination. Unlike Harry, who often appears to believe the world revolves around him, William understands that true leadership isn't about seeking attention. It's about service, integrity, and dedication to both the people and the institution. He represents the future of the monarchy, and it's becoming increasingly clear that he is more than ready to take the reins in a way that Harry and Meghan could only wish for. While they scramble to stay in the public eye, William continues to rise above the noise, embodying the values of the monarchy with a calm assurance that sets him apart from his younger brother's ongoing spectacle. Harry and Meghan's calculated stunts may have earned them a bit of fame, but they've ultimately shown that their version of the royal story is just a string of self-serving headlines. They can't seem to stop creating drama and controversy, all while clinging to the title of victim. The truth is, the public is growing weary of their antics. Though they may have temporarily grabbed the media's attention, their brand of activism is starting to lose its appeal. Prince William, on the other hand. Prince William doesn't need the media to validate his worth. His actions speak far louder than any statement Harry and Meghan could make. It's becoming more and more apparent that he is the true embodiment of the future of the monarchy. He is a far more worthy successor to the throne than his brother, who seems more focused on personal grievances than the greater good. While the ongoing drama surrounding Harry and Meghan may provide the media with a sideshow, it is Prince William who will lead the royal family with the dignity, respect, and strength that the position demands. As Harry and Meghan continue to chase headlines, William quietly consolidates his role and prepares for a future that's less about self-promotion and more about duty, something that seems to be lost on the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. While Harry and Meghan play the part of self-proclaimed rebels, William is proving that true leadership isn't about creating noise. It's about making a real difference. Online bullying? It's hard not to roll your eyes, just like we do every time Harry and Meghan make their latest attention-seeking move. Let's be clear. This isn't about protecting people from harm or advocating for social justice. It's about them craving the spotlight, turning every grievance into another public spectacle. And honestly, it's become so predictable, hasn't it? Harry, the eternal victim, and Meghan, the self-proclaimed activist, have once again thrust themselves into the limelight with yet another dramatic statement. But in the end, it's just self-serving noise. And despite all their claims of fighting for justice, what they're really doing is trying to distract from the obvious fact that they've become irrelevant in the royal family's grand narrative. Let's start with Meghan, the activist, who seems to think she has the right to lecture the world on everything from social justice to free speech. Honestly, it's almost laughable. Here's a woman who built a career by grifting, using her marriage into the royal family as a stepping stone to boost her profile and push her own agenda. If hypocrisy had a face, Meghan's would probably come with a warning label. For someone who's quick to preach about compassion and equality, her actions shout, "Do as I say, not as I do." She plays the role of the perfect, polished activist, but in reality, she's only interested in one thing: herself. It's no surprise that Meghan, always the drama queen, is now parading herself as a champion of free speech. Who better to represent the fight for online justice than the woman who has spent most of her adult life trying to control every narrative about her? We've seen it, time and again, how she plays the victim, cries foul when things don't go her way, and makes a spectacle of herself whenever she can. The same woman who constantly demands privacy and protection is now raising her voice about free speech, because, of course, it only matters when it benefits her. Then there's Harry, the eternal sidekick, always lurking in the background, trying to appear relevant while feeding off the scraps of his wife's celebrity. It's almost painful to watch, isn't it? He's like a man desperately clinging to the idea of rebellion, trying to prove that he's not just a rich, pampered royal who's had everything handed to him, But no matter how hard he tries, he can never escape the truth. He's not a hero or a savior. He's just a man-child trying to stay relevant in a world that's already moved on. Harry's constant need to make public statements about his grievances with the royal family is nothing more than a desperate attempt to salvage his crumbling reputation. It's really pathetic. He's the same man who walked away from a life of luxury, one most people could only dream of, only to repeatedly complain about the challenges of living in the public eye. Well, Harry, maybe you should have thought about that before you threw away your royal privileges to chase a life of so-called freedom. A freedom that now seems more like a burden than a blessing. What's even more outrageous is their claim that they're fighting for the common good when, in reality, it's all about them. Meghan and Harry, in their latest statement about free speech, seem to imply that they're the only ones standing up against injustice, as if they're the arbiters of truth in a world full of digital chaos. But let's not kid ourselves. This is just another desperate attempt to stay relevant and distract from the fact that no one is really paying attention to their cause anymore. No one really cares about their opinions anymore. Every move they make is calculated to provoke outrage and keep them in the headlines. And unfortunately, they've become experts at it. But there's a more sinister side to all of this. Every time Harry and Meghan speak out, it's a thinly veiled attempt to distract from their own selfishness. The public's growing impatience with them is clear, yet they refuse to recognize that their constant need for validation is only pushing them further away. If anything, they seem to think that by continually playing the victim, they'll somehow gain more sympathy and support. What they don't realize is that most people are no longer buying into their manufactured drama. This brings us back to their fundamental flaw, their total lack of self-awareness. Their idea of activism is really just self-promotion dressed in a nice package, and their dedication to causes is nothing more than an attempt to polish their tarnished image. Harry and Meghan have clearly perfected the art of making everything about them. They've mastered the art of creating headlines, but it's all just empty noise. They're not fighting for a better world. They're fighting for their own survival in a world that's moving on without them. And then there's the question of why we should even take them seriously. Time and time again, they've proven they'll say anything to stay relevant. They cry out about injustice and bullying, all while engaging in behavior that fuels the very things they claim to oppose. Their hypocrisy isn't just obvious, it's downright insulting. The fact that they've chosen to use their privileged platform to lecture the world on free speech and online bullying is honestly laughable. At the end of the day, Harry and Meghan are nothing more than self-serving, self-absorbed individuals who have somehow convinced themselves they're doing the world a great service. But the truth is, they're just actors in a never-ending drama they've created for their own amusement. They're playing at being rebels, playing at being activists, but in reality, they're just playing the game for their own gain. Perhaps the most striking thing about Harry and Meghan's antics is how completely out of touch they are with reality. For years, they've painted themselves as victims. Victims of the media, victims of the royal family, victims of the system. But the truth is, they are the ones who orchestrated this entire circus. The media didn't create their story. They did. They knew exactly what they were getting into when they stepped into the public eye, and now they seem determined to rewrite their narrative by playing the role of the underdog. But let's be real for a moment. Harry and Meghan will never be the underdogs. Not when they have everything at their fingertips: money, fame, power, and access. They've only got one card left to play: victimhood. And even that's starting to lose its charm. Soon, the public will grow tired of their constant cries for attention. They've exhausted every avenue of relevance, and now the best they can do is create noise, in hopes that someone will still listen. What Harry and Meghan fail to realize is that their grand narrative is empty. The public is no longer fooled by their act, and their desperate attempts to stay in the spotlight are only cementing their status as out-of-touch, self-important celebrities with no real purpose other than to make themselves feel important. If they think they're going to save the world with their self-righteous speeches and media manipulation, they're sorely mistaken. The world is moving on, and soon enough, so will they. So there you have it. Harry and Meghan continue to ride the wave of self-promotion and performative outrage, all while spinning a narrative that's as thin as the air they breathe. The drama is endless, and it seems they'll stop at nothing to keep the spotlight on themselves. But in the end, the real question is, will their antics ever be enough to win back the public's trust, or have they finally crossed the line from once adorable royals to a full-fledged media circus? As always, it's impossible to look away. Do you think Harry and Meghan are truly fighting for a better world, or are they just experts at keeping their names in the headlines? It's interesting to think about. Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm sure you have plenty to say about them. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to do so, because you won't want to miss the next piece of royal drama we uncover. With these two, there's always a new twist around the corner. So let's keep this conversation going.